Are Xbox fans getting a mid-gen refresh after all? What's up, y'all? I am Ray, and this is my channel, Xbox Ready, where we get on and we talk about Xbox stuff, the latest news, rumors, games, consoles, accessories, pretty much anything I want to talk about as long as it's about Xbox in some way. Now, ever since we started getting leaks of the PS5 Slim and the Pro and their eventual releases, there's been a lot of questions regarding what Microsoft is going to do to respond to either of those consoles. Are they going to have their own Slim, which I guess technically is just a Series S, or are they gonna have a Series X Pro? But despite a major leak at the end of 2023 where we saw this weird cylindrical digital Series X, Xbox ultimately came out and were like, no, we're gonna stick with our current lineup. We're not gonna have a mid-gen refresh, no Pro versions of our console. And eventually when they did end up revealing new Xboxes, the Black Series S, the digital Series X, and the Galaxy Black one, the assumption was that functionally these consoles were the same as the ones that we already have, minus a little bit of storage here and there, and also no disk drive on the digital Series X, obviously. But it turns out Microsoft pulled a sneaky on us because there is a change under the hood of these new Xbox consoles, at least with the all-white digital Series X and the Galaxy Black 2TB one. Ray, stop being cryptic, just tell us what's going on. Well, it turns out that Austin Evans, tech YouTuber and also friend of the channel, Xbox sent him the white digital Series X and the 2TB Galaxy Black one. And then he proceeded to do what he does best, unbox the consoles and then rip them open to see what is inside and then make a video about it. He admitted at the beginning of the video that, well, he wasn't entirely sure that there was going to be anything different about these Xbox consoles. There was a big possibility that they were going to be exactly the same as the Series X that we've come to know and love over the past 4 years. But as he dug in, he was able to make some pretty surprising discoveries and some not so surprising ones, like the digital Series X being lighter, having this big empty space where the disk drive usually is. The big takeaways from this, though, is that there are major changes with the heatsink and the processing chip in both the digital Series X and the Galaxy Black. He clearly shows that these new heatsinks have big copper heat pipes. The visual difference alone in the heatsink that's found in these new Xboxes versus the standard one is pretty striking, because on the standard Series X, instead of using heat pipes, it uses a vapor chamber, which he admits is technically better at cooling down a console than heat pipes, but it's also more expensive to manufacture. So wait, hold on, why would Xbox make their heatsink worse? Well, they didn't, not really, because they also shrunk down the processing chip to 6 nanometers in these new consoles. It makes it more energy efficient, they don't need as many materials to make it, and when paired with this new heatsink, it's able to actually save on some power without sacrificing the performance, which Austin shows off later in the video. And the thermal readings from what he measures are pretty much the same. He then goes on to officially dub these new Xbox consoles objectively better than the standard version. I will be curious to see if they end up adopting this new design with just all Series X consoles going forward like we saw with the PS5. Also curious, and Austin brings this up in this video as well, if they're going to bring any of these changes to the Series S or if they're just going to keep that the same. When it comes to this news, a couple of things are on my mind. Number one, for everything that we've been hearing about, oh, Xbox potentially ditching hardware and going full third-party publisher, sales being down for Xbox consoles, oh, they should just focus on distributing their games in Game Pass and ditch hardware entirely, or all this doomsaying about Xbox and their hardware, apparently Microsoft is not fazed with all of these news and reports that we're seeing about sales and all that other stuff. They seem perfectly content to be pumping out not only the existing Xbox hardware, but slight revisions to that hardware. I mean, my God, we're living in a world where there are 6 versions of the current gen Xbox: the Series S, the Series X, a Black Series S, a white Series S that has just as much storage as that Black Series X, a white Series X. Well, I can't even get all the names right. Well, basically, there are 3 different versions of the Series S and 3 different versions of the X. I would say that's pretty good news if there's any concern on your part of Xbox going the way of Sega and just bowing out of the console race. They've already confirmed, and we've been hearing tons of rumors about the next generation of Xbox hardware. So to me, Microsoft even giving the green light on a white digital Series X and also making revisions to the chip chip inside these new consoles. To me, that says, okay, yeah, even though we may not be at the top of the sales charts in terms of home consoles, there's still a place for them in our gaming division. Also, even though there's a new chip, even though the insides of these Series X consoles look slightly different, that does not mean that they're going to be able to stand on par with the PS5 Pro performance-wise. It's not a mid-gen refresh. They're not the answer. But at the same time, I think it's pretty much generally agreed upon that Xbox does not need an answer to the PS5 Pro, not at this point. My guess is that they switched things up for a number of reasons. The first one being that they wanted a cheaper way to produce Xbox consoles, and they wanted to make them a little bit more energy efficient. We've seen this over on the PlayStation side several times, actually. Even before they came out with the PS5 Slim, they were sort of modifying the base launch PS5, making it lighter, changing out the heatsink. I remember the first time they did it, my buddy Jimmy did a video with Austin Evans where they discovered that the heatsink was a little bit smaller compared to the original launch PS5s. That was when we first started working on this channel. And looking at that experience is what told me that sometimes the internet can be absolutely unhinged. Because in that video, they were like, oh, the heatsink is smaller, and there are a couple of other things that are different going on under the hood of this PlayStation 5. Based off of like our quick takes, I would assume that it is not as good at dispelling heat with this smaller heatsink and this different metal. I feel like that's a pretty benign thing to say, but man, people were pissed. People were trying to dox Jimmy. They were sending him death threats. Eventually, I'm going to try to get my hands on either a digital Series X or a carbon black one and check it out for myself. But thinking back on Jimmy's experience with a revamped PS5, or slightly revamped, it's got me thinking, man, like, I better be careful. And while there is a new chip in these Xbox consoles, I imagine that it's going to have like a slight performance boost, but it's not going to be anything crazy. We know that Microsoft Xbox, they are on this whole campaign of trying to reduce their carbon footprint and be an eco-friendly platform holder and game developer. So something like that, they made a huge deal about these eco-friendly dev kits that they're handing out to people, some of the Activision studios and 343 especially. So a GPU that uses less energy or is more energy efficient would align with their current goals as a company. Now, this whole power saving energy initiative that Xbox is pursuing, on the surface, it seems kind of boring, at least to most of their player base. Chances are, if you're turning on your Xbox console and you're trying to just play games, you're not worried about saving the earth. You just want to blow off some steam, hang out with friends, get lost in another world, or all of the above. But with things like the eco-friendly dev kit, the modifications that they made to our Xbox consoles with the standby power mode and instant on, it seems like they're going to great lengths to not only save power, but to make sure they are doing it in a way that doesn't mess with our Xbox's performance. Whether the Xbox is just on and hanging out on the dashboard, or if it's playing a super demanding game. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I feel like those things are going to be helpful for whatever console they develop in the future, especially if it's a handheld. Obviously, one of the biggest drawbacks of the Steam Deck or the ROG Ally is the battery life. So if they can find a way to deliver top-tier performance without so much energy, it could make something like an Xbox handheld that much more awesome. And finally, I do think that this slight change and the launch of these new Series X consoles, it signals to me that Xbox, they're finally moving on from this current generation. They're like, okay, we'll do one last tweak to our current generation lineup, and then we're just going to focus on the Xbox Next, this handheld, or whatever they have cooking up for the next-gen hardware. We've seen reports as early as this year that Xbox is full steam ahead, quote-unquote, on the next-generation lineup. We're at that point where Xbox would have released a mid-gen refresh like we saw last generation with the One S and X. I would also assume that's a point where they start seriously looking ahead at the next-gen hardware. As whack as it sounds to us, like, wait, we just got these consoles. Well, these companies, they always have to be thinking ahead. Now, are any of the changes that they revealed or that we've been talking about, is it gonna make someone who owns a Series X or a Series S even just say, oh my gosh, I need to get that, I need to get it now, I need to upgrade? Probably not. But I think if you haven't jumped into this current generation, you're still on that Xbox One console or even a PS4, I know there are a lot of people out there who are still rocking that last gen hardware. This seems to be as far as they're willing to push these current gen Xboxes. If you buy one right now, you don't have to worry about being blindsided a year or two later with a new shinier Pro version of either console. And yeah, I know there's been a lot of talk and so much content out there and discourse about how Gen 9, it's not worth it, it's not worth it, it's not worth it, just poo-pooing on the whole generation these past 4 years. And while yes, some of those arguments are valid, we've been seeing a lot of remasters, a lot of remakes, being told over and over again to wait for a patch to enable 60 FPS. I can only speak to my experience, but I've spent a lot of time with these Gen 9 consoles, and honestly, I do not regret it. With a few exceptions, a Series X is the best way to play your Xbox games on console. Sure, I can hook up my 360, pop in my disc that I still have of the Skyrim Legendary Edition, and play it like I did however many years ago. But it's not gonna look as good. My 360, well, it's seen better days, it's getting kinda loud, and I know what you're gonna say. Just clean it, Ray, just clean it. I do clean it. I've popped it open multiple times. It is squeaky clean. It's just old. Versus if I just play it on my Series X, I still have all the save data on it. It's gonna be a much smoother, snappier experience. That may not be the best example because, well, Skyrim is 13 years old at this point, but so many studios have already moved on and said, hey, we're not gonna support the Xbox One anymore. Sorry, even if you have a 1S or 1X, we're not doing it. And as much as people wanna try and be cool and say, oh, there's no good games, modern games are garbage, there are a lot of games that you can only play on current gen hardware that are really good. You want to play Space Marines 2 with your buddies on Xbox One? Sorry, you can't. You need at least a Series S. It may not have been a crazy jump from the Xbox One to the Series X. The overall experience with Xbox this generation, with VRR support, Discord on our consoles, smart delivery, quick resume, on top of this new crop of games that I've only been able to play on my Series X or S or on PC, all that to me has been worth it. I do not regret buying both a Series X or an S, which I recognize is a very unpopular opinion to hold nowadays. If you want to buy either of these Xboxes for yourself, the Galaxy Black one, the digital one, they seem to be pretty available. Right now, I'm looking on the Microsoft website, and I'm able to put them in my cart and even check out if I wanted to. Except the digital Series X, they say that's going to be here by November 5th, and with the Galaxy Black one, that's going to be out on November 18th if I choose express shipping. Anyways, guys, that is all the Xbox stuff we have to talk about today. Thanks so much for joining for another edition of Xbox Ready. If you made it this far into the video and you like Xbox, you like my content, consider subscribing. Help me on my journey to 200,000 subs. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.